The future of America is looking worse each day. If something really bad happens, are you prepared to protect your family? If not, My Patriot Supply is the nation's #1 preparedness company, and they've served millions of American families. Right now, you can save 25% off their popular 4-week emergency food kit, which will keep you well fed with 4 weeks worth of breakfast, lunch, dinner, drinks, and snacks totaling over 2,000 calories a day. This food stays fresh for up to 25 years in proper storage, so it will be there when you need it. So don't wait. Go to preparewithbill.com for more info. Good evening. I'm still reporting on the coup. Last night, Mark Levin had on the former British commander of all British troops in Afghanistan, Colonel Richard Kemp, retired. Colonel Kemp's the ideal of a military analyst. He is deeply schooled in his field and delivers his material in a matter-of-fact and non-ego-driven way that bespeaks his many years of giving intelligence briefings. His conclusions are that Afghanistan is a disaster for not only the United States, but all of Western civilization, and that will reverberate for decades to come.
And what we've seen in the last few days is it's the greatest foreign policy disaster that I have seen in my lifetime, of any nature, from any Western country. The threat. I think the threat is worse now than it was before 9/11, the threat to the West. The American forces have not been destroyed, nor have they been defeated on the battlefield, but they have been humiliated by their president. And I think all of these things and many others have massive strategic implications for the world and for the US prestige and for all of the good the US has done in the world. That's been undermined by President Biden's catastrophic decision to withdraw unconditionally.
In response to Levin's question about Biden blaming the collapse on the cowardice of the Afghan army, Colonel Kemp blasted back.
But I've never heard such a disgraceful speech from the President of the United States of America. He said the buck stops with me, but he then went on to explain how the buck actually stopped with everybody else. It wasn't him to blame, it was everybody else, starting from President Trump. So it's not President Trump's fault. It's not anyone else's fault. It is the fault of the President of the United States of America. To basically accuse Afghan forces of cowardice, that the Afghan National Security Forces have fought and died alongside American soldiers in Afghanistan, and 50,000 of them have been killed in action against the Taliban in the last 7 years. That is a phenomenal number. It dwarfs the casualties that we, Britain and America, took. And it's about 2/3 of the size of the current British Army. So for him to accuse them of not fighting and being cowards is absolutely shameful.
Colonel Kemp then revealed that the Afghan army was extremely dependent on the U.S. for air support, technical support, and logistics. In other words, the agreement was, if you give us air support and keep us supplied and keep us up and running, then we will do all the fighting for you.
And what he neglected to point out was that the reason that the Afghan National Security Forces collapsed is because he pulled the rug out from under their feet. They were doing most of the fighting in Afghanistan. Not the US Army, not the British Army, not the German Army. It was the Afghan Army that was doing most of the fighting and dying in Afghanistan. But they depended heavily on air support from the United States. They depended on technical support to keep their own aircraft flying, logistics support as well. And without that, they were far less capable of combat. But even worse, even more serious, I believe, than that, was that the decision of the United States to leave Afghanistan, to abandon Afghanistan, was such a devastating blow to their morale. The US was their final guarantor of success, of not having their country taken over by the Taliban.
Colonel Kemp then lamented the destruction of NATO at the hands of Biden.
I mentioned earlier the catastrophic effect on NATO. NATO is a very important military alliance. Many presidents have criticised it for not pulling its weight, of the European member states in particular, and they're right to do so. But President Biden has just completely destroyed its credibility, totally destroyed it, single-handed.
Colonel Kemp then gives us a grim prediction for the future as a result of Biden's betrayal of not only freedom-loving Afghanis, but the United States in particular and Western civilization in general.
And, you know, we're seeing what we face now is a terrorist threat coming out of Afghanistan that is greater than the terrorist threat before 9/11. They will be reinvigorated and they will launch attacks around the world against our countries, as they did really when they were being inspired by the Islamic State. Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State are strong in Afghanistan at the moment. Al-Qaeda fought alongside the Taliban in recent battles. They will operate freely. It doesn't matter what the Taliban say to you. They will allow the Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State to operate freely there. And they can operate more freely than they could before 9/11 because they know there's no fear of Western intervention now. That's finished. That's history. That's not going to happen again.
Like never, ever again? This is frightening.
They know that, and so they'll be even bolder than before. And jihadists from around the world will flock into Afghanistan to train, prepare, and launch attacks against the West. So the state of the terrorist threat is higher than it was at the height of the Islamic State's power when they controlled large parts of Syria and of Iraq.
Then Colonel Kemp explains that this is a windfall development for Russia, China, and Iran as well.
There's no one really who is celebrating this situation more than Russia and China. They're the greatest cheerleaders for what's happened. They've helped to bring it about. They now will look at the deterrent that the United States used to present, and they will see that they've got pretty much an open field to do almost whatever they like.
They will be able to do whatever they like, and the prospects of the U.S. regaining allies in this battle of freedom versus tyranny are very dim.
Those countries will say, why would we do that? These people are clearly fair weather friends. We can't rely on them. We can't trust them. And they will see Russia and China as being the more reliable ally than any country in the West. And so that will be extremely damaging.
He said that there has been an immediate effect on Taiwan, with their president issuing a statement that they must increase defense spending immediately. Sadly, Colonel Kemp sees dim prospects for that nation's brave fight against the Chinese communists.
But they are not capable of defending themselves against China. They do need the United States, and they're now wondering if they've got the United States.
He also concludes that Biden should not be impeached, but as the commander-in-chief be tried in a military court-martial.
So the whole world just became vastly more dangerous. The U.S. government, President Biden humiliated the United States. He humiliated the United States Army. In my opinion, and I don't say this lightly, and I've never said it about anybody else, any other leader in this position, people have been talking about impeaching President Biden. I don't believe President Biden should be impeached. He's the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Armed Forces, who's just essentially surrendered to the Taliban. He shouldn't be impeached. He should be court-martialed for betraying the United States of America and the United States Armed Forces.
I'm still reporting from the soon-to-be-restored Citadel of World Freedom. Good day.